Nyam
Okay.
Nyam.
Was
Nyam
it?
Nyam.
Yum yum.
And I just love saying it, so I just want to keep saying it.
So do I. But people have problems like hearing it and spelling it. So I've been advised a couple of times to change the company name.
No way.
But I think it's really cute, right? Yum yum yum.
I like it a lot. I like it a lot. And we're talking about how did you find your way to game development? What was the
Hmm.
process? Tell us how you got here.
Okay. So I studied computer science because I always knew since I was like 6 years old that I wanted to make video games when I grew up. And after I graduated, you know, from university, I went to Japan to work for a developer based in Tokyo called Acquire. They made the Tenshu and Way of the Samurai series in the PlayStation 1 to 3 era.
Sure.
And after about 4 years with them, I went to the UK to work at Rare and Connect Sports. And at the
Nice.
end of Connect Sports, I had 5 years of kind of like sort of like AAA experience. And that was the year of 2010 when the first iPad came out. And I saw sort of like this is an opportunity to go independent and make high quality experiences for the iPad. Because I did think at the time, that the iPad was quite a game changer from the iPhone because the phone was mostly kind of like small experiences that you played on the go. Whereas the iPad, I saw that immediately as a living room device, where people wanted to spend a lot of time with.
Totally.
And so that's when I co-founded Nyam Nyam. And our first game was called Tengami. Came out, I think, 6 years ago this month. It's a 6 years anniversary. And then, yeah, kept making games. It went well. We didn't go bankrupt. And we released our second game, Astrologaster, in May of 2019.
That's great. And they both have kind of a paper folding theme.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come about? Like, what was the inspiration for bringing that to now both of these games?
So the co-creator of Tengami, my colleague Phil, so both of us, we came up together with the idea and the concept for Tengami. And the base idea was, so like when we were analyzing what sort of games like would be good, in 2010 for the iPad, we kept coming back to this idea that the iPad is something that allows you to touch and interact with the world. You're manipulating a world.
Yeah.
And so we thought that games that allow you to manipulate a world would be best. And this reminded us of pop-up books, of flip books, because they have this really tactile feeling, like when you're turning a page and the world kind of like disappears, before your eyes and something else appears at the same time. And so we wanted to use this folding and unfolding of a paper world. We wanted that to be kind of like our core gameplay. And in order to make that happen, we created sort of like a proprietary toolkit. Phil did this primarily. He created kind of like a tool that sits in a 3D modeling tool called Modo.
Mm-hmm.
And this tool allows us to create these, or simulate these realistic pop-ups. And it took a long time to make this technology,
Sure.
at least 3 years.
Yeah.
So when I was thinking about what is the second game, I was like, oh, we need to use it again. Otherwise we just spend 3 years for technology that we only use in one game.
Yeah.
And so we reused it in Astrologaster, and I thought it fit well with the theme of Astrologaster because Astrologaster is based on the casebooks of a real historic figure by the name of Simon Foreman. And so it's sort of like you're bringing his casebooks alive in form of a pop-up book. But the other reason why I really also thought the pop-up could work again was because in Astrologaster, we are trying to frame it as like a theater play. or the way, that these characters are standing with each other, like each scene in the game is very deliberate. They're more like theater sets. And also the storytelling uses sort of like theater techniques.
Great. Well, that seems like a very clear line between, early development, investing in technology, and then really getting the most out of it by carrying that technology forward into your second game. And like you're saying, Astrologaster is a very theatrical game, like Shakespearean comedy, tragedy. It has all of the drama that you could hope for in a well-told narrative, right? And we'll cue that game up here in a second, but before we get to actually looking at the game and listening to it a bit, how did you handle the audio production for it? What was some of your thinking? Maybe even evolving from your first to your second game, choices or things you wanted to do different. What were some of your thoughts there?
So with Astrologaster, actually the audio came together quite late, I would say in the last 6 to 8 months. And one of the big reasons for that was that we decided really, really late in the project to have voice acting. Mm-hmm. And once we decided, maybe it was 10 months in, but not more than 10 months in, like 10 months before release, we really want to have voice acting. The characters really came alive. And from that onwards, we also decided to have choral music or madrigals. So each character or each patient in the game, they have their own songs. And then we also decided that the majority of the sound effects would be musical.
Right.
So basically from deciding we want voice acting, everything came together. The audio production for the game was very involved. So we worked on the voice acting side of things. We worked with Adele Cutting from Sound Cuts. She was our performance director, and her team prepared all of the voice files for us. Then on the audio side of things, our composer, Andrea Boccodoro, composed all of the musics. And he and the music supervisor, Emily Appleton-Holly, they arranged for all of the songs to be recorded here in London at Airedale Studios. I think we had 4 or 5 recording sessions that were simply amazing.
Yeah.
And then they also, they provided me with all of the files that I needed to put in the game. And then Andrea, he also did the sound effects, the musical sound effects. And a couple of the sound effects we actually reused from Tengami. So everything that's related to pop-up, like the folding of the page, that's the sound effect that David Wise did for us for Tengami. And Catherine Neal, who's a writer and lyricist, she also did, I think, 4 or 5 sound effects for things relating to the story.
Nice.
And so the way that the audio production worked is like I collected all of these files, and then I put everything into Wise and into the game.
Yeah, and
so
historically,
it was quite a massive undertaking.
I bet. And historically, you don't have an audio background. You have, as an independent developer, probably your hands in a lot of different things. So
actually, when I worked in Japan, when I was a programmer on Way of the Samurai 3, I did all of the audio programming with Miles. That was like 13 years ago.
Sure.
So I did have some experience doing that.
Oh, good.
But 13 years ago, everything was like super low level. And you can't compare to how it's done with Wise these days. And I think back in the day, I probably was on it like for at least on the audio programming side for a year. And because we used Wise, and it's also 13 years later, it only took me weeks to do all of this.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear. Again, I think playing the game today, it seems impossible to imagine it without all of the dialogue, without the songs, without without all of those pieces, it really does pull together the game, and it brings the drama forward, right? And so it's great to, that you ended up there. The process of that, like casting, like the whole thing, that seems like a big task to take on. You said the decision came kind of late. I don't know, what were some of the challenges there with pulling that all together?
So primarily the challenges were around money, because we hadn't budgeted
Sure.
voice acting.
Gotcha.
And then schedule and timeline.
Yeah.
At first we were quite nervous, like would we be able to find good actors? But it proved actually quite easy to find actors. So two of our actors in the game, Natalie Winter, who plays Alice Black, and Richard Reed, who played Thomas Black and John Whitgift. Like, they were really instrumental in helping us out and sort of like coaching us into this direction of doing voiceover.
Yeah.
And they, through their network, we did all of the casting just like through the networks of these two. Like, they put up our casting calls, in voice acting communities.
Yep.
And we got so many applications. And it was then, quite easy. So Catherine and we did all of the casting together. And the way that we did it for each role, we had a casting brief and then a short script for the actors to read. And we would separately from each other would listen to all of the auditions and make our short lists. And then we would just come together and compare our short lists. And in 99% of the cases, we had the same top threes.
Yeah.
And in most cases, even like the same top one. And then it was just, like going back to the actors and being like, sorry, we don't have a lot of money. This is what we can offer you financially. Is this okay for you? And actually everybody was very understanding and very supportive. And like everybody signed on that we offered the role to. And then I would say another step that was that made a huge difference was having Adele Cutting as our performance director.
Yeah.
So we had a demo version of the game in which Catherine and I had directed the voice acting, and actually after listening to it like weeks and weeks later, and I felt like that we had directed some of that stuff into the ground, because we just didn't know what we were doing.
Sure.
And so then working with Adele was like a real eye-opener, and she made a huge difference, to the performance of the actors. And, there were so many great things about working with Adele. So the way that we recorded was over Skype. So Adele, Catherine, and we would have a Skype session with the voice actor, and they would record at home in their studio. And then later on sent the files to Adele. And Adele and her team processed, all of the files so that it seems like the actors were in the same room when recording. And I think that really works. Like, you're not able to tell when you play the game that, all of these voiceovers were recorded with vastly different setups.
Yeah. And I reached out to Adele before this, and she was, this was a project for her that was just awesome to undertake. Her experience was fantastic, and one of the things that she shared with me about it was this process of having all of these different voice actors and actresses spread out, recording in their own spaces, and as you're saying, taking those files, and sometimes it was a matter of, using audio tools to get some consistency. In some cases, she mentioned even reaching out to the talent and asking them to adjust their room or their hardware pipeline, different settings to kind of find that equalization between the different talents. And I think that in addition to her ability to direct and her experience directing, that next level of working with the talent to tune their space, to tune their performance. It's all part of that job of voice direction and some of the unseen art of that discipline. So it's great.
Absolutely, and also it was like the way that Adele did it, during the session was super efficient, because she would call out the take that is the take that we are going to use in the game, and so her people only like had to cut, exactly that edit.
Yeah.
And I'd been in voice recording sessions before where you go like to a studio, and then you're provided with all of the 10 takes sometimes, for a given line. And so
then,
I really like that with Adele, we were just like, okay, third take, next.
Yeah. Right, because
okay, first take. And then you'd only just get the take that this is a good take, and you don't have to listen over and over again to decide which is the best take.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so there's the voice side, there's the dialogue, and again, this is a very dialogue heavy game. The other piece is like a lot of the story is told through song.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost musical theater in that way. Have you run across anyone yet who can sing back to you different parts of the story?
Not yet, no.
Okay, well maybe.
But I hope I will. When we were at GDC with the game a couple of years ago, we did meet a guy who was a countertenor. So you do sometimes meet, people who do this sort of singing. Maybe this year at GDC.
Okay, great. Well, on that note, congratulations on the IGF nomination and the nomination for the Game Audio Network Guild Awards. Again, like where you have arrived with this game, creates an entire experience that, supports all of the gameplay, as well as just creates a great experience overall. You're going to GDC. Like, what has that been historically like for you as you prepare for the launch of the game versus how are you feeling now heading into GDC after launch?
Feeling really good. We're nominated for 3 different awards, 1 at the IGF, 2 at the Game Audio Network.
Great.
So I think it's just going to be a lot of fun.
Nice.
A couple of people from the team are going, so we'll all celebrate. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to GDC.
Great. Well, I hope to see you there. It's always interesting each year, and I hope you have a chance to enjoy the post-release splendor and the well-deserved nominations. Let's spin some of the game a little bit, and we can talk through some of the different aspects of it, if that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, folks. Let's see if we can make this happen. Okay. So, and yes, Sophia from the chat room says congrats on the nomination. Again, when we talk about the IGF, I think there's a lot of other good folks who are nominated. We've got Knights and Bikes, Observation, Vectronom, Mutazone, and of course Untitled Goose Game. I mean, honk of the year at least, right? So a lot of good stuff there. Right. Exactly. Okay, so let's see how this gameplay thing works. We're just going to take it from the top and see how things unfold. because why not throw another technical challenge at this live stream? It wouldn't be fun if we didn't. Maybe not. Video's still a little laggy. I think, how does it look out there? Folks, pretty quiet. So, fingers crossed. Yeah. Gonna have to think about maybe getting a larger internet pipeline.
Long ago in England in 1592, there begins our tale, and all of it is true. Through all of London, bubonic plague did spread, covering folk in weeping sores and leaving thousands dead.
Oh yeah, we gotta have some acapella of that at GDC. Are you sure we can't prepare something for one of the awards ceremony on the fly? I don't know. Do we know any people? It's an official call for proposal. Okay, well, if we get crazy and ad hoc on the ground, perfect. Okay, great. I'm fixing some things. Hang on. Boop. Boop. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Audio input capture. Thanks for folks in the chat room. What a wild and woolly time we're having. At least I got to dance, and Jennifer's back. Okay, so we're talking about a little bit of ad hoc acapella at GDC. I think, what did you say? Which voices do we need? A bass, a tenor.
Soprano and alto.
Okay, so you heard it here first. If you're at GDC and you can fill one of those roles, get ready to...
Please do get in touch.
Get in touch with Jennifer. You can
immediately.
Yeah, this could be kind of wild. Okay, let's keep going here and see what happens next. And I love this.
From towns and cities, doctors they did flee, leaving their patients to die in misery.
But one brave doctor stayed when all the cowards fled. Might have been because he was too sick to leave his bed.
Okay, in a minute. I'm just gonna wiggle this a little bit. Cool.
'Tis my final hour. I will surely die. I am too far gone to recover, and for the plague there is no cure. Unless a cure might be found in the stars.
It's dark, but it's cheeky. So again, the presentation, it's very much a stage, right? Fantastic.
Yeah, and exactly, it's a stage. And the game is based on a true story of this Simon Foreman, Dr. Simon Foreman. And his claim to fame was that he cured himself of the plague via his, infamous strong water. And so this is where the game sets off his rise from, obscurity to being the curer of the plague, the self-proclaimed curer of the plague.
Right, and
the voice actor who plays Dr. Simon Foreman is called Dave Jones. It took us a very long time to find him. And he's doing an absolutely fantastic job throughout the game.
Yeah, absolutely perfectly cast. I've played through different sections. I've watched different sections, and again, as the game progresses, you can't even imagine anyone else in the role. It's fantastic.
And I think it's actually his first video game.
Okay.
So
That's
it's
a good-
yeah, it's
that's a
amazing.
good
It's
one.
amazing.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, let's get a little further into this. So we're now presented with the choice piece of this. And
Yeah, so Simon Foreman, he couldn't afford to go to university and get a medical license. And so he sort of like came by this method of treating and curing people via astrology.
yeah,
And in the game, you're presented with a real astrological star chart. Every consultation in the game has a time and date associated with it. And we are using, the exact planetary and positions of that
Yeah.
time and day in the past to tell our story. And then you're making story choices via this astrology interface. The way that I explain it to people is it's similar to The Walking Dead, but you're not making dialogue choices, you're making story choices via an astrology interface. And unlike The Walking Dead, there are actual consequences and knock-on effects of what you're choosing.
yeah. And as we play through this, we'll see some of that choice exposed. And Catherine's in the chat room, and so is Dave.
Hi,
So
Catherine. Hi, Dave.
it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us. And tremendous work, tremendous performance. Okay, let's play through this a little bit. So how might I be cured? Here's some suggestions and whether or not you want to use this as part. We'll go ahead and use that. We get some nice little musical stingers. Everything composed.
Yeah,
in
Andrea
key.
Boccadoro did all of those. Yeah.
Yep, fitting around there. So great, we got
Let
that.
me see now. According to the stars, the way to cure the plague is to treat the fever it provokes. Oh, can it be true? Might a disease so monstrous as the plague be cured by treating it as if it were an exceeding bad fever? Then I must use powerful herbs to bring the fever to crisis and break it. Let me see now. Angelica and dandelion for heat, borage to provoke sweating, infuse them in wine, strain and distill the mixture to produce a most powerful strong water.
Yeah, it's
There it
the
is.
famous strong water.
Yeah. Yeah, body thud on floor. Perfect.
Huzzah! I am cured. I shall
Sure
now
you
go
are.
forth with my miraculous strong water to cure all London of the plague.
Great. And so from there, it really, you start to get these summaries, right? And these you kind of carry forward and kind of collect and help you progress through the game.
Yeah, it's sort of like a representation of his case books, right? So every case has like an entry where you're reminded of what has happened and what are the choices that you made.
Yep. Great. And again, you're trying to gather these letter of recommendations. So this is another piece where when we were talking about the choices and the consequences that you have, that's a piece of this where you're trying to make the informed decision that will get you these letters.
Yeah, so like I said, Simon Foreman, he really wanted to have a medical license, but he couldn't afford to go to university. So eventually, this man left behind 80,000 records of people that he treated using
Wow.
astrology, and many of his patients were, very satisfied with him, and they wrote letters of recommendation on his behalf. And eventually, the University of Cambridge in the UK said, "Oh, it seems like you know what you're doing. We'll give you this medical license." And as a game developer, you couldn't make up stuff like that. So of course, we had to put it in the game that you're trying to get letters, enough letters of recommendations to get a medical license.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And the level of detail, you had several historians also engaged on the project. Like, what was that
Correct.
process?
So the game only exists because about 5 or 6 years ago, I met Lauren Cassell. She's a professor at the University of Cambridge And she has been studying Simon Foreman's casebooks for the last 25 years. And for the last 10 years, she and her team have created a digital online archive with, I don't know, maybe 35,000 cases. And you can search these records.
Wow.
And you can sort of like see, themes, like what sort of questions people came to Foreman with. And you can also see how these people were related to each other. And it's a really fascinating database, and it's a really fascinating story. And what I especially liked about these casebooks is, why people are coming often, what is the question? And you can sometimes know what he answered, but often you don't know what happened next. Did these people survive?
Yeah.
Did they follow his advice? And it's
Oh, man. But the drama is there, right?
And in the game, we sort of tell you what happened. That's a good thing. But still, like, we wanted to keep it with this, you're just like seeing like pieces of these stories, and then people go away and they don't come to you for some time. And then when they come back, you get a little bit of insight in what has happened, but you never get like 100% of the story.
Yeah, of course. But the drama is there, right? The
drama is there, and it fits really well with the, with astrology as a theme, because also astrology is an interpretation. And, do you ever 100% know what's going on?
Right. And, there's the words that he says, and there's the way that people interpret them, and then what they